of the amazing things with Carver Life and Poems is that this is poetry that then could be used not only as social or historical connections, but also making scientific connections. So as students are reading poems about the discoveries that Carver made with legumes, you could have an actual science experiment where students are planting legumes and watching them grow and thinking about what this means. So here is actually something that Carver wrote because he was very engaged not only with students at Tuskegee, but also with younger children because he wanted to make a social impact through farming and through better agricultural practices, particularly for African Americans in the rural South. So, one thing that he wrote is, a very large part of a child's education must be gotten outside of the four walls designated as classroom. The most effective and lasting education is the one that makes the pupil handle, discuss, and familiarize himself with the real things about him. And following on that idea, we could actually engage with those real things. So first of all, here is a picture of some of Carver's students. It's titled The Wee Tots, and it was in the Tuskegee Bulletin. And then we can move on to activities with our own students. Say, hey, Carver did this with students, now let's try it ourselves. So first, as part of that real experience, you should get, what do plants need to grow? Because that's what these students are doing, right? They're working in a garden. Well, depending on the age group, you could have a sheet where they're just matching things, or a sheet where they actually need to come up with the things that they think a plant needs to grow. And then, once they have hypothesized about this, you actually go out and figure out what are the things a plant needs to grow. And they would follow it up with a revised sheet where they have now learned what plants need to grow through engaging with those plants. And if you were getting to middle or high school students, you could take it a step further, thinking about things like sustainable farming or going to the National Peanut Board in groups and finding reasons that peanuts are an important plant for sustainable farming, which is such an important thing right now. Because hopefully by middle school or high school, you know that plants need water, air, sunshine, minerals in order to grow, also time. But thinking about a step deeper is something that you could do online, and maybe in an actual science class then, as you are growing peanuts with kids, it would just be, hey, what do they need to grow? If you're growing them with high school students, test the soil. Say, how do the compounds in the soil change before and after the peanuts are planted? So you would also have to time this so it occurred at times that it could be tested throughout the whole life cycle by the students. So here's a possible activity. Give students some peanut seeds. And then talk about how Carver shared seeds like this with students and farmers throughout the rural South. In fact, he invented a special wagon so he could take these seeds out and give them at no cost to people so they could start doing more sustainable farming and have better yields and better life out in the rural South. And then tell the students, hey, we're going to plant these seeds in a glass container. Why glass? Because in a glass container, you could watch the roots. Because one of the things that's so important about the peanut is what it was doing with the roots. It wasn't just the crop that was produced. It was that peanuts help bind nitrogen to the soil, which is essential for growing other crops. And it's not even something, although we now make fertilizers and try to sort of force nitrogen into the soil, that doesn't bind it to the soil. You can put as much nitrogen as you want in there. If it doesn't have something that helps bind it, you're just making really expensive polluted water. Legumes actually fix that nitrogen with the soil. Another thing that does that is lightning, but that's a different conversation altogether. So these legumes can reattach the nitrogen to the soil so that afterwards, the plants that follow will have a more nitrogen-rich soil. Plants like cotton, which really suck all the nitrogen out. That was the sort of magic of peanuts that Carver discovered. And if you put them in a glass container, you could talk about that, pointing out these root systems, having students see it as it happens, having older students actually testing the soil and finding out why this mattered so much. So, little extra credit activity. Look up some of these primary sources about Carver and nature studies at schools available in the Library of Congress collections. These are some of these different studies. And then you could write a blog post and post it on our class webpage as a piece that you explored for this class. So this is an assignment you could give to kids. Extra credit, having them go a step further, look at things that maybe catch their interest about Carver, and then share it with the class in sort of a fun, accessible way. So these are activities that would take poems and move them into science, move them into engaging with research as part of a class activity, part of a larger unit where you're looking at Carver through all these different lenses and all these different subjects.